So I'm just trying to get a Padraig unmuted here so we can get going.
Okay. I'm muted now.
Happy
You can hear me
days.
now?
Yeah. Just trying to get this working. Make sure everyone's in and out. We don't have people in the waiting room. Right. Anyway, I suppose we can get started here.
Starting on time, man. That won't do.
Huh?
Starting on time, that won't do.
No. Right, so thanks everyone for coming today to talk on Tomás MacGiolla's Republicanism, a positive vision for the future. My name's Owen Gardner. I'm a member of the Works Party Dublin Midwest branch, and I'm going to be chairing the event today. Today's talk will be given by Padraig Mannion, a member of the Workers' Party Ard Comhairle, in which he'll outline the socialist Republican vision held for our future by Tomás MacGiolla, former Works Party leader, TD, Lord Mayor, Councillor, and Socialist Republican Revolutionary. Following the talk, we're going to open the discussion up to a Q&A session, during which Padraig will take questions from the floor. But before that, we're going to have a video of our comrades Angela and Sean Boland from Ballyfermot laying a wreath at Tomás's graveside, where Comrade Dave Gardner, Works Party rep in Palmerstown Fonthill, will say a few words. So I'll just get that video up now. Can people see that, yeah?
Yeah.
Perfect. And hang on, I need to share the audio as well. If I can find how. There we go. Right.
I'm standing today by the graveside of our late comrade Tomás MacGiolla, Workers' Party leader, TD, Lord Mayor, City Councillor, and Socialist Republican Revolutionary. Indeed, Tomás was a leader in the truest sense of the word. Tomás and men like him offered real leadership, never shying away from a challenge out of fear. Where others have cowered and betrayed, the commitment Tomás and his comrades had to their class and our cause was simply too strong. Tomás spent his life working to build a better Ireland, fighting the corner of the ordinary working class people in the face of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and their wealthy backers. He knew that working people needed a political party to represent our interests. This is why, alongside countless comrades from all over this country, Tomás made the Workers' Party his life's work. Tomás remains to be held in high esteem by many, but perhaps most notably in Ballyfermot and the surrounding areas, where he was a councillor and a TD. Poverty, unemployment, housing, a lack of facilities, these were some of the issues that plagued the lives of working class Dubliners, and indeed for many, that remains the case today. Tomás fought tooth and nail to bring about much needed positive change on these issues and more, and to the end, the perpetual cycle of misery facing many working class communities. Always looking at the biggest picture, MacGiolla was all too aware that to rid ourselves of these issues for once and all, the working class people had to be in control of this country, and that to achieve that, we must build up a party of the working class capable of securing the establishment of a 32 county socialist republic. It was for this reason that Tomás stuck with the party through thick and thin. As early as the 1960s, alongside the likes of Goulding, Garland and O'Hagan, Tomás could see the need to turn the Republican movement into a mass movement of the working class. This meant building a party that could address the everyday issues that matter to working class people. Recognising this necessity angered some malcontents who abandoned the Republican movement and its politics to form professionals, in favour of neither socialism nor republicanism, but indiscriminate sectarian murder, further dividing the Irish working class along sectarian lines. Those same people, as modern-day Sinn Féin went on to implement vicious austerity on working people in the north, hand in hand with the DUP and the British government. Meanwhile, in the south, they had most recently made public their intentions of governing with Fianna Fáil or anyone else who take them, which can only mean business as usual and no real positive change for working people. Indeed, Tomás fought against the attempts of opportunists to destroy the principles of our party, including the careerist and democratic left, who sold out the working class to land themselves crushing ministerial positions from which they implemented austerity hand in hand with Fine Gael. For his unwavering commitment to fight for our class and our party, we remember Tomás MacGiolla with pride this day and every day. And I leave you now with a powerful quote from this great man, describing simply and shortly our aims of the party. The prize is freedom, oppression is the enemy, our weapon is the people through the party.
The party of the working class is the political instrument of those who both need and want to change the world. And that is a job description of the Workers' Party.
So thanks to Angela, Sean and Dave for their contributions there in remembering one of the greatest men to serve our party and our cause. Building the party was indeed Tomás's life work, and the importance of carrying on that work cannot be overstressed. Only a party of the working classes envisioned by MacGiolla, Garland, Goulding, O'Hagan and others can address the problems facing ordinary working class people. The failures of successive governments in Leinster House, Stormont and Westminster are to blame for these problems, and are exactly why we have to realise and fight for the vision put forward by MacGiolla and others like him. That we have thousands of people homeless on our streets, people struggling to make ends meet every week, young people forced to emigrate because there's nothing for them here. None of this is a coincidence, nor has it happened by chance. It is a result of a capitalist system which prioritises the unimaginable wealth of the tiny capitalist class over the well-being of the majority within society that keeps the world turning, the working class. Only in a 32-county socialist republic, where the barriers of geopolitical partition and the societal division have been broken down in favour of working class unity, can we hope for this to change. Now we're going to come to the main part of today's event. I'm going to ask Comrade Padraig Mannion to deliver his talk now. I'll just get the slides up.
Thanks, Owen.
Bear with me now. Can you see that there, Padraig?
Yeah.
Perfect. So far ahead there whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks Owen, thanks to everybody for turning up. I see just from the list here, there's a very good crowd have turned up, and I'm sure in the best tradition, a few people will turn up late. If you just go on to the next, Tomás had a really long career in politics. Like from the time he joined the movement at the beginning of the 50s, during the time of the anti-partition campaign, which was a sort of an official government Fianna Fáil sort of idea at that time, which he realised was going nowhere. Until his death, he was involved in politics, like a 60-year span, 1950 to 2010. But his public career in politics was also very, very long. His first foray into electoral politics, even though I'm not sure what party could have played in it, considering where he was at the time, was as a candidate in Tipperary in the 1961 general election. And we can see there one of the election handbills for that. And to my knowledge, one of the last public events, obviously there were internal party events he took part in, but the public event that he took part in was in Cork in 2008 on Hiroshima Day, where he went to Cork and spoke, and with the person there beside him, a representative of a Japanese peace group, remembering the horror of nuclear war and the destruction wrought on Hiroshima and then subsequently on Nagasaki. So it's a long political career. And like in that political career, from 1962 onwards, Tomás was in a leadership position in the movement, Sinn Féin, the Workers' Party, and the Workers' Party. And I've worked out, he delivered, for example, 26 presidential addresses to the party, Ard Comhairle. He would have attended Ard Comhairle meetings, between 450 and 550 Ard Comhairle meetings, and innumerable branch meetings, Comhairle County meetings in Dublin, and meetings all around the country. And I would just move on to the next slide, Owen. So he, as he said himself, that in that length of time, that he came through many political struggles, many climates. But what he was doing at all of those was learning and moving forward. And obviously, unfortunately, some people get an idea when they're 20 and stick with it. Tomás didn't do that. He learned, he developed, he moved forward. And probably where some of the continuity of ideas and the change of ideas takes place is in the source that I have used, which is on the next slide, Owen. It's the presidential addresses from Tomás, either on printed form like that, in forms that I managed to download from the web, or copies that I had myself over my years in the party. I've had access to most, I think all but one of the presidential addresses, which I think gives, I think, a very good insight into Tomás's thinking and the continuity, as I say, and development of that thinking. There are obviously other documents in the public domain which we have looked at as well. Now we're looking here because it's going to be, it's a very, we can only, in that amount of information that's available, like that would take a full seminar to go through, a full weekend, which we don't have. And I'm sure if I spoke for 2 hours instead of my allocated 35 minutes, there would be uproar and many people leaving, naturally enough. So we're just concentrating on his positive vision, what he took as a positive, because he ranged over an absolutely wide range of issues. And also because this is dealing with a very sort of his positive, his vision going forward, it may come across that he was always sweetness and light and looking forward. But Tomás could mix it with the best of them in political debate. And just going through the debates, I see that he has accused by name 3 Taoiseachs, Lynch, Fitzgerald and Haughey, of political corruption and being in hock to big business, 6 ministers of selling out our resources for, again, through corruption. He accused another former Taoiseach, Liam Cosgrave, of being, he did this in the Irish section of his speech, of being Log Inchkinnock, which translates, I suppose, the best translation of it is either imbecilic or feeble-minded. He accused O'Brien, and he didn't usually refer back to people who had left the movement, as basically a person who right through the 60s had hated the secularism of Tone and despised the socialism of Connolly. So as I say, we're looking at his positive vision, but let's not be confused. Tomás in political debate was not St. Francis of Assisi by any manner or means. And one of the things I think just important, and we'll see it on the next slide, is Tomás's view there with his comrade of the continuity of republicanism, and how our struggle is a continuation of struggle. But he looked at it in a very particular way, because he looked at the continuity of ideas, not the continuity of action. It was the continuity of ideas and the continuity of philosophy that he looked at. And like, he spoke about that on numerous occasions. Like, that could be a complete speech. But for example, in '68, he said, true republicanism and true socialism are identical, are based on the brotherhood of man. And socialism, he made the point on more than one occasion, socialism derives from our experience, our lived experience. It is not an imported ideology. Again in '75, the continuity from the Jacobin Republic of France to Wolfe Tone, the men of no property, to the Fenians, and right through he would have linked it to Connolly, Mellows, and then the Republican Congress, and making the point at all time that Provoism and sectarianism was the enemy of republicanism. And Some of the inherent class struggle, as demonstrated by, from the time of Tone, when he was relied on the men of no property, McCracken, who said the rich will always betray the poor, right through to the present moment. So the necessity to recognise class and the necessity to engage in class struggle, he saw as part of the continuity, even though that phraseology was expressed through Marx, which he recognised. And he also, I think, even as in 92, made the point that our socialism grew from our democratic, secular, republican principles, from our knowledge of and identity with earlier struggles in our history, and particularly learn from the lessons learned from our own history. And not only was Tomás, I think, anxious to show sort of the continuity of philosophy, the continuity of ideas, but he also took time to recognize the continuity of organization, that the party that he was involved with from the 1950s until the day he died, that there was a continuation of that. And it's Tomás very seldom looked back. In all of the their speeches, there was a very seldom looking back. He always looked forward. Only really in 1975 at that Ard, which happened fortnight after the pogroms, did he spend much time looking back. But in 1970, he spent a short period of time, maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs in quite a long speech. And for people who are looking at these speeches, sometimes quite confusing. The 69 Ard was held in January 70, and the 70 Ard was held in January 1971. Republican time, don't worry about it. But it's just one of those factors. But he said in 1970 Ard in January 71, I wish therefore to place on record, I'm talking about the legitimacy of official Sinn Féin, from which Sinn Féin, the Workers' Party, and the Workers' Party grew. I wish therefore to place on record that the election for president and the Ard Comhairle at the 69 Ard took place when all delegates were present. All delegates participated in the voting, and they duly elected a new president and executive to hold office. There is therefore clearly one legitimate Sinn Féin organisation, and this is it. So I think he was the continuity both of ideas and of organisation was important for Tomás, and he didn't harp on about it, but he did repeat it sort of in brief snippets again and again, like I said, from the 60s right through until almost his final speeches at that time. So Tomás's republicanism is overarching. As I say, it includes for him socialism, it includes for him the class struggle, it includes for him a lot of things. But I'm going to break it down just to make it manageable insofar as possible into a couple of areas, essentially into the areas of human dignity and democracy. And Tomás saw those as linked, but for the purposes of just for the presentation, we'll break them out. And I think the next slide, when he was looking at human dignity, there were a number of issues which he looked at, and not only the human dignity, but more the indignity of not having access to these. And one of those, and one of the earliest ones, on which the question of dignity, the question of the haves and the have-nots, the question of stark poverty against stark riches was highlighted, was on the question of housing. And people will know that from the, moving on 66, 67, the whole issue of the Dublin Housing Action Campaign in Cork and later in Derry, what it led to and what it didn't lead to. But in 65, he was dealing with this issue. And he was saying, all this racketeering and rackmanism is carried out with the willing cooperation of corrupt officials and ministers and minor officials. And I think it's important that he realized that it wasn't just one section, that there was landlords, TDs, and people in authority colluding in the question of rack rents and Rackmanism. And from 1965 onwards, he referred repeatedly to slum landlords condemning them, referring to the huge housing lists, to corrupt planning. He always made the point that corrupt planning was not a victimless crime, that people suffered because of corrupt planning. The need for council housing, the need for fair allocation, and he didn't distinguish the situation north and south. Obviously, he pointed to numbers and to particular situations, but these were rights, and it didn't make any difference to the most whether you were Protestant, Catholic, or dissenter, or none of those, or whether you were in Belfast or Ballybunion. These were human rights, and this was a question of human dignity that he looked at. And he also, I think, put it in a wider question. But he looked at the constitutional situation, the law, the divine right of property. He looked at the need for a planned city. He looked at the difference back as far as 1985, before the bank bailout, where AIB and ICI, the Investment Corporation of Ireland, were bailed out at a time when there was massive cutbacks in social housing and in welfare. He was talking about the hypocrisy of official morality, but where was the commitment? Where was the morality of unemployment, healthcare, etc. The rights, the question of the morality of the rights of women, which we will get to. He felt that local authorities should be building council houses, but he didn't see a dichotomy between a planned economy and that role that councils, the local authorities, should be building local authority houses. And that, I think, was, he had an overarching view on that. The second issue that he dealt with, as a question of human dignity, he also dealt with maybe the next slide on, he dealt with health, sort of basic facilities, but the issue of fighting back. Sort of, that one wasn't held. There were a whole series of those posters. One of them was on there were ones on jobs as well, just that we didn't have access to another photograph. He did again. There are numerous occasions where he dealt with the absence of healthcare, the cost of healthcare, the immorality of having to pay for healthcare. That was one of his strong points over many, many years. But unemployment, he dealt with unemployment under economics, the horribleness of it, the lack of money, all of that, the lack of productive, why people were lying waste when we needed things. But he also, I think, was very aware of unemployment as an affront, what it did to individual people. And he looked at it both, that from the point of view that employers, were didn't care about people, that profit came before people, and like way back when, I think we'll see it in another slide. Like actually, we had the slogan as far back as 1975, of people before profit, dealing with issues like housing and like that. But as I say, he obviously dealt, with different trade agreements, different the EU, the Anglo-Irish trade agreement, multinationals, fly-by-nights, people using Ireland as a cover for tax dodges, all of that. Like he dealt with all of that in a very comprehensive fashion. But he dealt, I think what makes it a human issue, and like what distinguishes Tomás and his view on this, was that he didn't look at people as statistics. that he had this vision of hope, that people were entitled to dignity. So he spoke about, the indignity of being made redundant, of being told that you are useless, that you are not needed. Like the human indignity of that, the indignity of having to queue up, and like when Tomás was speaking, to queue up for the dole, the outside Gardner Street Labour Exchange, outside Cumberland Street Labour Exchange, outside the Labour Exchange in Werburgh Street or in Victoria Street, people queued in the street in the rain, and until the doors were open, and even then, the queues went back out. So you queued up, but there was a physical indignity, in getting your dole. If you weren't there at the exact time, if you didn't have the right form, if your hands looked dirty and you looked like you had actually done a day's work, there was an indignity in that. And if you looked too scruffy, there was a question. If you looked too well dressed, there was a question. So like he looked at that, and he also looked at the hypocrisy of the hundreds of, not probably not hundreds, but certainly maybe there were, of inspectors dealing with what was called, and probably still are called, dole spongers, but nobody looking at the employers who didn't pay their PRSI and left people without pay-related insurance, who didn't pay their workers, who didn't pay tax, who hid their income in all sorts of tax fiddles. So like he contrasted the he contrasted the fate of somebody being made unemployed with the fate of the employer and of the wealthy class, and of the fact, as I say, that as far back as 1985, our Irish bank was being bailed out because of their bad investment in ICI, but Irish shipping was let go to the wall. And the other issue, I think it's on the next slide, Owen, was the question of culture. Now, I don't think we could have put up a picture of Tomás MacGiolla, but I don't think that would be very edifying. Yeah, is there a problem with the sound from here, Owen?
No, I can hear you fine, Padraig.
Okay, yeah, sorry, just got a message from somebody. Okay, but Tomás looked at culture and the question of culture, and he felt and believed, that part of the liberation, part of republicanism, was part of that view of mankind, was that everybody was entitled to equal access to culture. And he had a democratic view of culture. Now, because Tomás spoke Irish and a love of Irish right through his political life, he emphasized the importance of Irish and Irish culture. But he never did that in a negative way. He never did that in a narrow way. He never believed that you should be congruent about that you should being narrow or being exclusive. But he did believe, I suppose, very much on a kind's basis, that if you lost the language and lost that part of your culture, then it was something that would never be reclaimed, and then that would be a national disgrace. But he spoke on culture like right through his political career, and like, for example, in as far back as 1970, he was talking about the state at that time of the National College of Art, and just from the National College of Art at that time was stuck in a little corner of the building where the Dáil has now expanded to, between the National Library and the Dáil. It had a dozen rooms there, and the entire teaching method, everything was out of date by about 40 years. But like Tomás was speaking about that at an Ard in an Óráid and Uachtaráin at that time. And he was talking about that. But culture for him was broader just than access to the College of Art. He was somewhat like culture in a planned city. In 1977, he was talking about, Dublin at that time, a planned city, beautiful city, an efficient light rail transport, mixing, an industrial port, mixing recreational and work, labour and leisure, where past and present merge to make Dublin a truly modern city, a great city to live in. He was talking in 79, that our school children should be introduced to every aspect of culture, not only language, but drama, music, painting, etc. And he understood that you couldn't put that burden, landing it just on school teachers and boards of management. And even though Tomás was not by any means an advert for modern technology, he recognized the importance of it. And that time, RT2 was just starting, and he thought, that RT2 the facility there should be used in the same way at the time as BBC Two was being used by the Open University. And again in '82, he's speaking about that. The need to transform our society in this aspect. The day-to-day life of the community, whether on the bleak industrial estates, in the overcrowded schools, the near desolate farmland, it relates to cultural and sporting facilities for our young people, provision for the old, support for the anxiety-ridden families, the rejected and downtrodden elements which capitalist society tosses on the scrap heap. He believed that everybody was entitled to dignity and to culture in their lives. And apart from the normal things, the normal campaigns of supporting libraries, I think he makes a really good speech in 82 or 80, I forget which. Is it not true, comrades and friends, that in many other parts of Western Europe, whole regions and towns have been transformed in terms of the quality of life of their citizens? Jobs, libraries, museums, theatres, sports centres have been provided because these areas have been won for socialism by determined workers. He talks about culture, the celebration of the life of the common man. Culture is not the property of the universities, the rich, the privileged, of those with maximum leisure time. It belongs and springs at its best from the joys, tragedies, laughter, and song of the people. So he had a democratic view of culture, that everybody should have access to it and everybody should enjoy it. And he believed, in the role of socialists in promoting culture and promoting equality of culture and promoting cultural values. And he didn't go in for any of this hoity-toity culture, where you have to wear a monkey suit and black gloves and a tall hat. That wasn't culture. That was just showing off as far as Tomás was concerned. And I think we can still see the difference. Now, in the issue of democracy, and I say within Tomás's concept, he might have disagreed. He thought all of this was democracy. In the next, he also, by the way, thought football and hurling and soccer was culture. And Tomás could, if you were driving with Tomás, he could as easily move a conversation from the hurling All Ireland to an international football match, to talking about Martin O'Kane or Padraig Mannion or Liam Flaherty. So that he himself in his own life understood. It wasn't that he had just an intellectual understanding of this. He actually saw it all and was easy to speak about on all these questions. The next slide on, please. Yeah. So I think that's actually the poster there, People Before Profit, and a by-election in 1975 with Rini Prendergast. Like Tomás, he believed that women should have a more prominent role in politics and in the party. And he always took was always at the forefront in promoting women in the party, women candidates, and like for example, when the magazine Women's View was being brought out from 81 to 91, he always insisted that resources be made available to that. And looking back, and it actually struck me as incredible, how this was a revolutionary demand in 1967 was actually seen by many people as a scandalous demand. It's not in a presidential address, it's in a lecture that was given in 67 and was later published as part of another document. When he was talking about the need for work, useful work for all citizens, equal treatment for men and women, and equal pay for equal work. Now, in 1967, it is incredible to me. It's incredible, probably most people here, like that was even a demand. But that was seen then as a subversive demand, and quite a lot of the older fuddy-duddies in the party at that time certainly would not have appreciated it as a demand or agreed with it as a demand. They might have stayed quiet, but they certainly wouldn't have agreed with it. The whole, he spoke on numerous occasions, of rights of women, the rights of women, I said, to be in politics, the rights of women, for family planning, and sort of whatever the demand was or whatever was agreed. Like Tomás was always at the forefront in that. In 1977, in a part of a much obviously bigger speech, he said, the electorate also have many questions to ask the government about democracy and civil liberties. They want to know why a constitutional emergency was declared when none exists, why the Taoiseach shows the utter contempt for the Parliament and Constitution, and etc. But then he says, what about the civil rights to divorce and the use of contraceptives is denied, and when the civil and legal right to equal pay for women is refused? So not only is he saying that those demands should be met, but contrasting that they are not met while the government concentrates on issues that are not issues that are of no, that are fake issues as far as he is concerned. And I said this big bit goes on for an age, and I'm not going to read it all out, but I think it's important to realise that that he thought of those issues at that time. When in 77, when there were murder and mayhem going on around the country. In 1981 to 1983, Tomás was very, very strong, both in his addresses, and I think people may have seen excerpts, again from his speeches in the Dáil, were put online a couple of years ago by Eilish, I think, and other people, in opposition to the Eighth Amendment, which thankfully, even though he didn't live to see it, the Irish people got removed in 2018. But he was one of the few people, and the party was the few organisations that opposed, political parties that opposed the Eighth Amendment being inserted into the Constitution. And I wasn't on the article, but I remember a debate at that time, and Tomás's, the slogan at the time was, for democracy and tolerance, vote no. And I say it wasn't in the referendum of 1983. It wasn't an easy referendum to be going against church and state, but Tomás was fearless in opposition to the 1983 amendment, and afterwards fearless in condemning the outreach of that referendum. Again, in 85, he's attacking the hypocrisy of official morality. And at that stage, it was just before a failed referendum on divorce, and the fact that at that time, and for another 10 years, there was the official constitutional bar on the right to divorce and the right to remarry. And he made the point in '88 in his last speech: the emancipation of women is one of the general aims of the party. As things develop, the change, the level of change needed develops, and women decide the concrete form this general aim should take. 70 years ago, it was a vote. Now is the right to divorce and remarry, and opposing the sectarian, and he made that point more and more often, the sectarian Eighth Amendment. So he realized that questions evolve and questions develop, but that at all times, whatever the issue was on the rights of women, to participate in life and to have control of their bodies, Tomás was actually to the forefront, which again, maybe for somebody of his age and his era and his background, one would not necessarily expect. But it certainly was a mark of him and what he said in their speech, after their speech, sort of that hope. And it was from the idea, again, of the rights of man, the equality, that if people are equal, then they're entitled to equal rights. There's no other concept, as far as he was concerned, that you can take. You cannot be a Republican and say that one part of society should have a lesser set of rights than some other part of society. So it was that overall vision, of what we view society as. Now, obviously, for any socialist, how am I doing on time?
We're on about. Sorry, I'm just trying to check here. I'd say about 30, 40 in all together. So.
Yeah. So no, okay. No, I want there's a thing on the economy. I think Tomás's views on that. There's another one quote, I think, on.
Sorry, Padraig, you say next slide?
Next slide, yeah.
Sorry.
Mannion, I think that. But in any event, like Tomás's view, just to explain, that Tomás's view developed on the economy, and it developed from, sort of criticizing foreign encroachment and what it was doing to the Irish economy, to developing a view on the need, for co-ops, to fight against redundancies and foreign, when companies go out of business just because they can move their capital elsewhere. Eventually, to a very complete critique, a much fuller critique, where he looked at banks, and rather than looking at the question of banks as, the bank made X amount of profit, 100 million pounds of profit, or 50, whatever, just making a difference, he realized that the importance of banks was not particularly in the profit which they made, even that was important. It was in the capital resource which the bank had available to it to invest in the economy. So that's why Tomás was in favor of the nationalization of banks. That's why he was in favor of using insurance money in our economy. It wasn't because they were necessarily profitable, and they had to be, but because of the capital they controlled, the combined savings, the profits on earned income, the profits from workers that we put into those. And as time went by, the whole role of multinationals, the whole, what they were about, was seen very, very clearly by Tomás. And then the whole role of state companies, not only in the first instance, which was that we have to defend state companies for what they are, but again, he saw the role of state companies to expand, that they actually were the actual drivers of initiative. So they were the real entrepreneurs in the Irish economy. On more than one occasion, he made that point. He also made the point that if we had a proper set of planning north and south, that the heavy industry based around Harland and Wolff, which was at that stage beginning to go down the tubes, and has gone down the tubes at this stage, was the basis to build, whether it's for the other heavy industry, for the mining industry, for the offshore oil industry, for a proper integrated farming and food industry, for a proper seafood and fishing industry. So it was an overall, vision, a very positive vision, whereby people could have full employment with dignity, which is important, and continuity. The next one, Owen, please. For Tomás, that's a famous photograph from '84, where Tomás is walking out of the Dáil. De Rossa is about to walk out of the Dáil, and after that, I forget any of he's about the person who's sitting down here beside
Gregory is a part of
Tony Gregory will walk out of the Dáil in protest about Ronald Reagan's visit and the fact that he was given the freedom of the Dáil and Oireachtas to make an address at a time when they were bombing. When they were absolutely engaged in terrorism, especially in Honduras and Nicaragua. But Tomás had believed that the basic right and the basic duty of a free and independent country was to have a free and independent foreign policy. That your foreign policy should not be dictated to by your neighbours, whether they're a political neighbour or an economic neighbour. They shouldn't be dictated because we were in the Anglo-Irish Agreement. They shouldn't be dictated to because we were in the EEC or the EU as it became. And they shouldn't be dictated, which he saw a huge danger for, because the Irish government pretended, that US investment depended on us towing the US foreign policy line. He opposed all of that. He thought it was undemocratic and un-Republican. And he was very, very strong. From 1962 actually, in his first speech, right through until he sat on the platform opposing the Nice Treaty and opposing the Lisbon Treaty. The need for neutrality, the need for world peace was central to Tomás's thinking. And right through that was important to Tomás. We don't have a picture of it. I don't know if there's a picture somewhere of even in 1983, I think when Tomás was Lord Mayor, he was invited to the celebration of Bastille Day in the French embassy. He went, he delivered a letter of protest because of French nuclear testing in the South Pacific and left. And as we say in the picture, the very first picture of Tomás was in 2008 at Hiroshima Day. So neutrality and anti-nuclear, anti-war was a huge, huge part of Tomás's positive vision of what republicanism and what socialism meant. The next one, Owen, thanks. That's sort of his internationalism, which I think we know where he stood internationally with the PLO, Sean, Dizzy, looking like Rasputin, and Tomás in Moscow at the World Peace Conference, 1973, I think. But what's the next one on? Yeah, that's the piece again. The next one, yeah, Northern Ireland. That's Tomás speaking in Uri. So Tomás always spoke. There were two things that were revolutionary as far as Tomás was concerned. One was civil rights. So that everybody were treated as equal citizens. That to him went back to his republicanism, to the rights of man, to Tom Paine. That there was not discrimination because of your religion or because of your political orientation. So that was really important to Tomás. And he believed, and he always emphasized that the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association was a campaign for democracy, because to make a democratic Northern Ireland was to undermine the basis of Northern Ireland, which was designed as an undemocratic state. It wasn't a nationalist campaign. It wasn't a Republican campaign. It was a democratic campaign. And Tomás, from when that campaign was conceived in 1967 or 66, when we started talking about it first, right through time and time again, Tomás repeated that. There were a number of other things that he spoke about on numerous occasions. Was how peace was a revolutionary demand, because peace in the North allowed class politics, and that was the only way you could, without class politics, without the unity of the Protestant and Catholic working class, or the working class irrespective of religion, then no progress would be made, because the situation would stay as is. And in 1967, he was talking about the Republican clubs being banned, which were what we were called at the time. And Craig, he banned the rights of the common man. He banned the philosophy which put the rights of man above the rights of property. He banned the dangerous doctrine of Tone, the Fenians, and of Connolly, a doctrine which transcends borders and creeds. In North and South, power rests in capital, whether Catholic or Protestant. Republicans say that power should rest with the people, whether Catholic or Protestant. And in 68, he was talking about unity. It must be made clear, however, that Republicans do not ask the people of the 6 counties to come into the existing 26 county state. We would not wish that fate on anyone. We ask the people of the 6 counties to join with the people of the 26 counties in abolishing both states, which serve only imperialism, and in establishing a democratic socialist republic for the whole island of Ireland, where the workers who create the wealth repeated. There's an entire list of all this now where he repeated this. The peace, the terrorism and sectarianism is counter-revolutionary, and
apologies for that.
These things happen. Don't worry about it.
That slide you were on, if you want, Padraig.
No. How far? No. That's basically again. It's just a campaign. But I'm just making the point. He made the point of did the voice? What I was saying, was that lost for a while?
And no, sorry, it was just my connection went, but the meeting continued anyway, so it should be
okay. Yeah. Okay. So I said continuously he made the demand that peace is a revolutionary demand, that terrorism and sectarianism are counter-revolutionary, and when there is sometimes a view, especially as Tomás said, an ultra-left slogan: "The worse things are, the better," which he dismissed as the usual Trotskyite rubbish. So his demands were for peace, for a Bill of Rights, a democratic devolved assembly, against sectarianism, for class politics, the unity of the working class. And here he emphasized the necessity for a united trade union movement, and then the power of the united trade union movement to fight sectarianism and to fight terrorism. And just maybe the last, the next slide. No, is there one between? Anyway, no, we get to that difference. But Tomás, I say, he always spoke that Republicanism gave people hope. And that was an important. The class politics. We washed away the hypocrisy of the De Valera era, which he quoted John Montague, where instead of facing problems in the past, we bury them in religion. He repeated on more than one occasion, educate that you may be free, because the government's view and the establishment's view or keep the people in ignorance, and you will keep them in slavery. His view was that fight apathy. We should fight the apathy which is caused by unemployment, poor housing, and alienation. As he said in that quotation there, or is it that we should, that we should always be proud of our past, but we should never be shackled by our past, and we should look forward with hope. I think that was his view, that there was, a view that republicanism was for human dignity, it was for hope, it was for the fulfillment of life. And as he said, Tomás didn't seldom quote it directly from authors. He would quote the concepts, refer to the concepts, but very seldom take a full quotation. And so therefore it's unusual when he quotes this from Marx, from the 18th Brewery or wherever. Men make their own history, Marx said, but they do not do it as they please. They make it under the self-selective circumstances, or the circumstances already given and transmitted from the past. So he recognized we can't control the situation we've been given, but we have been given the tools to decide how we go forward. We stand proud of our past, but not shackled by it, looking forward with hope. That was in 79. He would have said the same speech in 89 or 99 or 2009. Our past is our past. He said in a different speech, I am proud of everything I have done, but it is time to move forward. I think that's I think the message from Tomás. The republicanism is about looking forward, about hope, about dignity, about democracy. Thanks, Owen.
Thanks very much, Padraig.
One of Tomás's last campaigns about Elizabeth O'Farrell.
I think that's the end of the slideshow there. Thanks very much, Padraig. Now I enjoyed that. I'm sure everybody else did as well. I'll just stop the screen share. We can now open up to questions. If anyone has any questions they want to ask Padraig, either there should be a button saying raise your hand, or if people just actually raise their hand, people with their cameras on, I'll be able to unmute you if anyone has any questions there for Padraig. Or if people want to put them in the chat option down the bottom. Just make sure I'm not missing anyone. Right. So we've no questions, do we know?
Well, that either means that it was wildly exciting and everybody is completely understood what I said, or everybody said, for fuck's sake, Padraig, would you ever give over? So I'm going to take the first view of it.
So there's a question there, Padraig, from whoever's using the Look Left account. Do you have any favourite memories of Tomás?
It's very difficult to say because I knew Tomás for quite a long time. I met him first in '76 when I was involved in the students' movement. I think obviously from '82 until Tomás died, I was in the office. And in the last 2 or 3 years, because Tomás didn't drive long distances, I would have driven him here and there. And I think what I liked about Tomás, was when he was in full flow about a subject. How human he was. And the other thing about Tomás is looking at him, he could meet, say, a comrade like Padraig MacGiolla, who was, whatever age he was, a veteran from the 40s, the 50s, a veteran of everything. And he'd speak respectfully to Tomás, or to Padraig MacGiolla. He could meet somebody who had just joined the Workers' Party, through Workers' Party Youth or Workers' Party Youth, and he equally treated that person with respect. So I think that level of respect, that level, that if somebody was there, they should be treated with respect and dignity. And he didn't stand on ceremony. I think that was what I liked. And Tomás could go on around about all sorts of things, so not necessarily political. In 2008, we were in Waterford at an Easter commemoration, and afterwards we went to Sean Mulch's brother's pub. People were having a drink. I was driving, so I was stuck drinking black coffee. And Tomás wanted to go. People were going outside for a smoke, and Tomás would then got into a rant, this tirade about this ban on smoking. That he had smoked a pipe and cigarettes for 50 years, and he was alive and well. And his friend Sean O'Kenny, who never smoked, didn't drink much, and looked after his health, had died at the age of 61 or something, whatever. Sean was 65, 20 years younger than Tomás was. It wasn't always political, Tomás's conversation, but I think that the fact that he could range over such a wide range of things and be so human was one of the things I think that was endearing about Tomás. That he wasn't a robot, that he wasn't sort of a political nerd that only thought about politics. He was a full human, sort of with a full range of interests.
Sound. Right, so if we've no more questions, I'm going to thank everyone for coming to this today. So thanks to Padraig, obviously, for giving the talk. Thanks to Angela and Sean Boland and Dave Gardner for their contributions in the reclaim and the few words. I hope everyone found the event interesting and useful, especially going forward. And I'll leave with I'll finish on one more quote if that's all right. Our objective is the reconquest of Ireland from the ground landlords, the river barons, the speculators, the cartels and the monopolies, and the struggle against them will now be intensified. If needs be, we must be prepared to win back our country, farm by farm, river by river, mine by mine, shop by shop, and factory by factory. And that's from Tomás as well. Right. Thanks everyone for coming. Agus slán go fóill.